The possibility of Tanner McKee being traded this offseason is no longer just a random rumor floating around league circles. It's a legitimate conversation. And when you step back and really analyze the quarterback landscape across the NFL right now, you start to understand why. We're coming off Super Bowl 60, the 2025 season is officially behind us, and the Eagles are entering a very interesting offseason period. It's that calm before the storm, before the combine, before free agency, before the draft, and this is when front offices quietly lay the groundwork for major decisions. Now look around the league. There are multiple quarterback-needy teams, and this is happening in a year where the quarterback class is extremely light. That matters. It changes the market. Teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers have uncertainty. Are they rolling with Will Howard? Is Aaron Rodgers coming back? The Miami Dolphins are in transition with a new coaching staff and questions at quarterback. The New York Jets don't have stability. The Minnesota Vikings situation spiraled after watching Sam Darnold lead Seattle to a Super Bowl. The Arizona Cardinals are a mess, and there's chatter about Kyler Murray's future. The Las Vegas Raiders are expected to draft Fernando Mendoza. The Atlanta Falcons could release Kirk Cousins while Michael Penix is coming off a torn ACL. The Cleveland Browns have drama surrounding Deshaun Watson and the possibility of Shedeur Sanders. The Indianapolis Colts saw Daniel Jones tear his Achilles. That's a lot of instability. And here's the key point. When the draft class is thin and free agency isn't strong either, teams start looking at the trade market. And that's where Tanner McKee enters the picture. McKee is in the final year of his rookie deal. He's cheap, he's controllable, and he has shown flashes. He throws with touch, timing, anticipation. He's tall, sees the field well, and comes from Stanford. When he's played preseason or limited regular season action, he's looked composed. ESPN even listed him among quarterbacks who could be traded this offseason, noting that the Eagles' backup quarterback is always in danger of being dealt under Howie Roseman. There's context here, though. McKee is 26 next year, so he's not a 21-year-old project, but he hasn't had extended game action, meaning there's still a developmental arc. In Week 18 action, throwing mostly to backups, he looked acceptable. When he connected early with DeVonta Smith to get Smitty over 1,000 yards, he looked sharp. There were moments where you thought his value could spike significantly. At one point, you might have argued he could fetch a second-round pick. After the uneven performance and considering the circumstances, a third-round pick feels more realistic right now. And that's the debate. Would you trade Tanner McKee for a third-rounder? On one side, quarterback security matters. If something ever happens to Jalen Hurts, you need stability. On the other side, if a team is desperate and the market is inflated because of a weak draft class, that's how you capitalize on value. Look at the alternatives around the league. In the draft, Fernando Mendoza is at the top. Ty Simpson is being talked about as the second-best quarterback in this class. In free agency, Malik Willis is being viewed as one of the better options, which tells you everything you need to know about the strength of this quarterback market. If you want to trade for someone like Kyler Murray, you're taking on a massive contract. Aaron Rodgers' future is uncertain. Tua Tagovailoa brings durability and arm strength concerns. When those are the headline options, suddenly a player like Tanner McKee becomes very attractive to a team that doesn't want to overdraft a quarterback in the top 10 and risk setting their franchise back 5 years. Think about it from the perspective of a rebuilding team. If you're sitting in the top 10 and you reach for a quarterback because you feel pressure, that decision can define or destroy your front office. We've seen it happen over and over again across the league. But if you can acquire a young, inexpensive quarterback who has shown NFL flashes and you only give up a third-round pick, that's a much more manageable gamble. McKee's appeal is layered. He processes quickly. He throws with anticipation. He's shown timing-based rhythm passing ability. He's not a raw athlete trying to figure out the position. He's a pocket passer who understands structure. In limited action, he hasn't looked overwhelmed. And when you factor in his contract situation, final year of his rookie deal, extremely affordable, a team could bring him in, let him compete in camp, and if he plays well, extend him at a reasonable number before the market explodes. But here's where it gets complicated for Philadelphia. Howie Roseman has built this roster on foresight and value. He anticipates departures before they happen. He drafted Cam Jurgens before Jason Kelce retired. He doubled down at corner with Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean as Darius Slay aged. He prepared for Fletcher Cox's retirement by investing in Jordan Davis and Yolan Carter. That's what he does. So if Howie trades McKee, it won't be reckless. It will mean one of two things. Either he's completely confident in the quarterback depth behind Jalen Hurts, or he believes the value being offered is too good to pass up. The Eagles are projected to have around $20, $5 million in cap space, and that number could increase depending on the league's cap rise and potential restructures. They have decisions to make along the offensive line, at tight end, at safety, and in other depth areas. Draft capital matters. A third-round pick is valuable currency. That's where you find starters. That's where you build sustainable depth. At the same time, we all know how quickly a season can flip if your starting quarterback goes down. The Eagles win nearly 70% of their games with Lane Johnson on the field and look drastically different without him. Now imagine the impact of losing Jalen Hurts without a trustworthy backup. That's not something you brush aside lightly. This is why this conversation is fascinating. It's not just about Tanner McKee, it's about timing, it's about market dynamics. It's about whether quarterback desperation across the league creates a window for Philadelphia to extract maximum value. If a team like Pittsburgh, Miami, or even Indianapolis calls and offers a third-round pick, maybe even sweetens it with conditional upside, do you pull the trigger? Or do you prioritize quarterback insurance and keep developing McKee inside the building? This isn't a black and white decision. It's calculated risk management. The Eagles are not desperate. That's the key difference between Philadelphia and most of the quarterback-needy teams we talked about. The Steelers, Dolphins, Jets, Vikings, Cardinals, Browns, Colts, they're searching. They're evaluating. They're feeling pressure. Philadelphia is stable at the most important position in sports with Jalen Hurts. That stability gives Howie Roseman power in negotiations. When you're not the desperate team, you dictate terms. If a team calls and offers a fourth-round pick, that's an easy no. If they offer a third, now you listen. If multiple teams inquire because the draft class is thin and free agency lacks star power, you potentially create a small bidding environment, and in a year where teams might talk themselves into overpaying for quarterback security, the Eagles could benefit. But let's not ignore the internal football side of this. Tanner McKee fits the system. He understands the offense, he has continuity with the coaching staff, he's developed inside the building. When he stepped in during Week 18 and connected early with DeVonta Smith, there was rhythm, there was chemistry. Even though he was throwing primarily to backups, there were flashes that suggested growth. That matters in a backup. You're not looking for a superstar. You're looking for someone who can execute the structure if called upon. There's also the financial element. McKee is extremely affordable in the final year of his rookie deal. If he stays and continues progressing, the Eagles could extend him at a team-friendly number. If he leaves and you have to replace him, you're either drafting a developmental quarterback, which costs draft capital anyway, or signing a veteran, which likely costs more cap space. And remember, this roster isn't static. There are offensive line questions. Finding a future replacement for Lane Johnson is critical. Addressing depth at guard or center could be necessary. There are conversations around tight end, whether through free agency or the draft. Safety remains an area to monitor. Every draft pick counts when you're trying to maintain a championship-caliber roster. That's why this decision becomes strategic, not emotional. If you believe McKee can become a long-term high-end backup, or even more, you keep him. If you believe his ceiling is solid but replaceable, and the market is inflated because of league-wide quarterback scarcity, you maximize the asset. There's also timing to consider. This isn't just about 2026. It's about roster construction for the next 3 years. Quarterback markets fluctuate wildly. What looks like a weak class now could shift perception after the combine. A surprise free agent signing elsewhere could change leverage. One injury in training camp across the league could spike trade value instantly. And here's something else that can't be ignored. Perception around the league. If executives view McKee as a viable camp competitor in a year where Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, or Ty Simpson might be overdrafted, that elevates his worth. Teams fear missing on quarterbacks more than almost any other position. That fear creates and we've seen before how quarterback panic reshapes draft boards and trade markets. Philadelphia doesn't need to panic. That's their advantage. So the real question becomes philosophical. Do you prioritize short-term security behind Jalen Hurts or long-term roster flexibility and additional draft capital? Do you trust the developmental pipeline enough to replace McKee if necessary? Or do you believe his presence inside the building is more valuable than a third-round selection? This isn't about headlines. It's about timing, value, and calculated risk. And the most interesting part, the Eagles don't have to force anything. They can wait. They can let the market develop. They can let quarterback desperation across the league intensify. So as we head deeper into this offseason and the combine approaches, keep your eye on this situation. Because if quarterback dominoes start falling elsewhere, Tanner McKee's name could move from rumor to reality very quickly. And let's take this one step further, because the ripple effects of this decision would not stop at quarterback. If the Eagles move Tanner McKee for a third-round pick, that pick immediately becomes ammunition. It could be used to move up in the draft. It could be packaged in a deal for a veteran at a position of need. It could be used to reinforce the offensive line, which, as we've discussed, is going to be critical with Lane Johnson not getting any younger. It could help address safety if the team decides to get younger there. It could be part of a long-term succession plan somewhere else on the roster that we're not even fully anticipating yet. That's the kind of flexibility Howie Roseman values. But here's the counterbalance, and it's important. Quarterback continuity inside a championship window is priceless. You don't want to be scrambling if something unexpected happens. The Eagles are built to compete. This is not a rebuilding team. This is not a roster searching for identity. You don't weaken a contender unless the return is undeniably worth it. And remember something else. McKee's value could rise if he stays. If he performs well in preseason, if he shows growth in camp, if quarterback injuries hit other teams late in the summer, the market could intensify. A third-round pick today might turn into something slightly stronger tomorrow, or it could disappear entirely if teams solve their quarterback situations elsewhere. That's the gamble. This is why front offices earn their reputations in the quiet months. These are the decisions that don't always grab national headlines immediately, but they shape seasons. They shape depth charts, they shape flexibility, they shape insurance policies. For the Eagles, this isn't just about trading a backup quarterback. It's about understanding the league landscape better than anyone else. It's about anticipating desperation. It's about knowing when to sell high. It's about knowing when security is more valuable than draft capital. And make no mistake, teams are watching Philadelphia. They see how the Eagles have developed quarterbacks. They see the infrastructure, they see the coaching stability that boosts McKee's credibility around the league. He's not coming from chaos, he's coming from structure. So as this offseason unfolds, don't be surprised if this conversation grows louder. Don't be surprised if insiders start mentioning specific teams. Don't be surprised if trade speculation peaks right before or right after the combine. When quarterback evaluations become real and front offices face hard truths about the class, this could go either way, and that's what makes it compelling. And the longer you sit with it, the clearer it becomes that this decision will ultimately come down to conviction inside the building. Conviction about what Tanner McKee truly is, and conviction about how volatile the quarterback market might become over the next several months. If the Eagles internally believe McKee can win games in stretches if called upon, that changes everything. Because then you're not just trading a developmental backup, you're trading real stability. And stability at quarterback is something franchises spend decades searching for. Philadelphia already solved the hardest part of the equation with Jalen Hurts. The question is whether they're comfortable adjusting the layer beneath him. There's also a psychological element. When players inside the locker room know the backup quarterback is capable, it matters. It impacts preparation. It impacts confidence. It impacts how the team responds if adversity strikes. Even if McKee never plays meaningful snaps next season, his presence can still hold value in ways fans don't always see. At the same time, the Eagles have consistently shown they are willing to be bold when the numbers make sense. This front office does not operate emotionally, they operate analytically. If they believe a third-round pick today has a higher probability of producing long-term value than keeping McKee as QB2, they won't hesitate. And consider the timing of the NFL calendar. The Combine will intensify quarterback discussions, pro days will amplify hype, teams will convince themselves that a certain prospect is better than expected. But they'll also uncover flaws.